Welcome to tonight's edition of Under the Bleachers. My name is Chris Ransom. William Yannish had a last minute neck injury, so he will not be joining us tonight. Brandice Bell will be joining us. She may choose to join at 8:30 rather than 8. The reason I'm starting early is because we had 4 game recaps for this weekend. Mid-season bracket, plus we also had 9 games to predict. That is just too much to cover in 30 minutes. It is. So I'm going to step up to the plate here and cover what I can cover as far as game recaps go. There were 3 main games on ABC this weekend. Miami, Florida played Louisville to start things off at noon. You had Cam Ward and Tyler Show trading punches in this game. Offensive shootout. Hurricanes prevailed. And Cam Ward just continues to validate why he's the number 1 quarterback in the 2025 NFL Draft. The second game featured Tennessee, Alabama, and my dad's alma mater, Tennessee, at Neyland Stadium. Very sloppy first half. A forgettable first half by Nico Imaleva and Jalen Milroe. Alabama led 7-0 at halftime. Nico Imaleva rallies the troops in the second half as the Vols win. The third game on ABC featured Georgia and Texas. Georgia defeats Texas 30-15. That's a tennis score, by the way, but they came into Austin, Texas, made quite the statement as the Bulldogs avenged their earlier loss on the road to Alabama. And Alabama's at 2 losses now since losing to Vanderbilt, Texas. Georgia's at 1 loss. So taking that into consideration here, I like Georgia to win the SEC, but we will talk about the SEC and some of the other topics later in the show. And there was one more game William wanted me to recap. I'm going to go to the YouTube channel since I forget what that is. And basically, I'm on my own. This show works a lot better when William and Brandice are here. And to be completely honest, I'm just going through the hypnosis. I'm going through Illinois, Michigan. That's the game we were going to talk about. We were going to talk about the Illinois-Michigan game, I believe. I didn't watch that. I know it was on CBS. Part of the reason I didn't watch that is because I had my attention on the Alabama-Tennessee game. I heard Illinois beat Michigan. Michigan's now at their 3rd loss of the year. I was also focused on the ALCS with the Cleveland Guardians facing elimination. They did lose to the Yankees on Saturday, by the way. But looking at the segments, looking at my top 12 here, I will go through my top 12. I don't think Alabama's going to make the playoff. One of the topics William wanted to do is pick a team that's going to miss the playoff. Alabama, I think they're going to miss the playoff. They got Missouri on the road. They got LSU on the road. I don't think Alabama makes the playoff. When Brandice calls in, we'll get her take on that. But again, looking at everything here, I have got number 1, I have Oregon. Number 2 in my playoff is the Miami Hurricanes. I've got the Hurricanes at number 2. They're undefeated. Number 3, I've got Iowa State. And Iowa State, right now, there are 11 undefeated teams in college football. The undefeateds are going to get priority over the 1-loss teams. That's just how it is. Texas A&M and LSU are the only SEC teams without a conference loss. And Texas A&M has won more SEC games than LSU. So Texas A&M, every SEC team's lost 1 game, whether it's one non-conference game. There's not an undefeated team in the SEC left. There are two teams in the SEC that have not lost in conference play yet. The LSU Tigers and the Texas A&M Aggies. They play this Saturday. I will break that game down later in the show. But that's a big game because whoever wins that is in the driver's seat to win the SEC title. Whoever wins that game is probably going to play Georgia in the SEC championship as long as they win out. That's the reality of the situation. As long as they win out, they're going to play Georgia in the SEC titles. That is a big game. Because whoever wins that game between Garrett Nussmeier and Connor Weigman has the opportunity to control their own destiny. Texas A&M has the better overall conference record. So as of this point, Texas A&M is my 4 seed. Number 5, Penn State. Penn State, they are undefeated. They play Ohio State in a few weeks. They go to Wisconsin this weekend. Penn State is number 5 for me right now. At number 6, it's BYU. BYU barely defeated Oklahoma State. They were trailing most of that game, but they got lucky in the last minute. Ole Gordon finally went off in that game. So BYU Cougars come in at 6. Indiana comes in at 7. They spanked Nebraska 56-7, gave Dylan Raiola an Animal House hazing ritual. That Indiana Hoosiers defense, they spanked Dylan Raiola and Matt Rule 56-7. They come in at 7. And Indiana's only tough opponent is Ohio State. They get Ohio State on the road, but they could finish 11-1 and sneak into this thing. If they beat Ohio State, they will play Oregon in the Big Ten championship this year. That's literally all they got to do. Number 8 is Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Panthers are 6-0 for the first time since I was born in 1991. They play Syracuse on Thursday. That'll be the first game we break down in the prediction segment, but they come in at number 8. Number 9, the Army Black Knights. The Army's currently undefeated. They will have to play Navy if things hold up, they will play Navy in the American Conference Championship, and then they will play Navy in the annual Army-Navy game the following week. So if Army and Navy both continue to remain undefeated, which is one of the topics William wanted to discuss tonight, if that happens, they're going to have to play each other twice. And I doubt both teams sweep each other. I doubt one of those teams sweeps each other. Navy plays Notre Dame this weekend. I do expect them to lose that game. I do think we will start to see things shake up. So even though Georgia is out of my top 12 at the moment, Liberty's undefeated, but they're not in the top 25. There are 1-loss, 2-loss teams that are receiving more votes than Liberty because Liberty's only 5-0 on the year. Their game against Appalachian State, a big non-conference game, got canceled due to Hurricane Milton. So there's no makeup. They're not going to make that game up. So even if Illinois runs the table, they're going to be 11-0. And there are 1-loss teams in the group of 5 that just look more appealing on paper. So that game is and then at number 12, my Ohio State Buckeyes come in and round out the top 12. Now, I do expect some shakeup in this top 12. For example, how do I think it's going to look after next week? Well, I want to break down the 9 games on the slate with Brandice when she gets here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through what I think the top 12 is going to be after this week. Okay? I think Oregon remains at number 1. I think the Miami Hurricanes remain at number 2. Iowa State. Who does Iowa State play this week? Iowa State is on a bye, I believe, and their next game is against Texas Tech on November 2nd. Yeah. So Iowa State, they will remain at number 3 because they have a bye week. I think LSU beats Texas A&M, and we move them up to number 4 in the polls. But that is going to be a tough game to pick. Kyle Field's a very tough environment to play in. If Connor Weigman can outduel Garrett Nussmeier, the Aggies can steal this one. But I'm going to go with LSU. And I think LSU will probably move up to 4. The reason I'm putting Texas A&M and LSU ahead of Georgia is simple. Both teams are undefeated in SEC conference play. That's how it should be. The team that's undefeated in SEC conference play should be the SEC team, should be the top 4 seed for the SEC in the college football playoff. I think Georgia's the best team in the conference. There's zero doubt about that. On paper, the Bulldogs are the best team in the conference, but until Texas A&M and LSU lose a game in the SEC, Georgia's not going to be my number 1 SEC team because LSU and Texas A&M have 0 SEC losses in conference play so far. I know that sounds stupid, but I'm a stickler for perfection. So Texas A&M and LSU are ahead of Georgia in the official SEC standings. So until one of those teams loses, Georgia's going to be behind them in my rankings. So I'm going to I think LSU will probably be 4th. Penn State will probably remain at 5, but I think they will lose to Ohio State the following week and move down in the polls. BYU. What's going to happen with BYU? They play Central Florida this weekend in Florida. Central Florida started the year 3-0, but they lost 4 in a row. But Central Florida is considered the best 3-4 team in the country. This could be an upset where the Central Florida Golden Knights knock off the BYU Cougars. I'm going to go out on a limb and pick BYU to win, but I would not be shocked if Central Florida pulled the upset. If RJ Harvey and KJ Jefferson, both great at running the football. BYU struggled against the run last week. This has trap game written all over it. Screw it. I'm changing my pick from BYU to Central Florida. I think Central Florida upsets BYU this weekend, but we'll leave BYU. This is a tough game to pick. Honestly, I wish I had some input from Brandice here. I'll know if she's here because I'll hear the thing when she arrives. But for now, I'm going to give BYU the win over Central Florida. But my gut is telling me Central Florida upsets them. And they have the talent to do it. So we'll leave BYU at 6. Indiana's going to remain at 7 in this poll. Pittsburgh plays Syracuse on Thursday. They are going to beat the Syracuse Orange and improve to 7-0. But it's not going to be an easy game. And Pittsburgh's quarterback's going to have to outperform Kyle McCord at Acrisure Stadium. Syracuse could very easily defeat Pittsburgh and shake things up. Pittsburgh, as soon as Pittsburgh loses a game, what do the Pitt Panthers, Pitt Panthers get Syracuse at home. Syracuse is 5-1. If Kyle McCord can step up, or Andre Gadsden, if the Orange can step up, they can go into Pittsburgh and steal that game. And then after that, Pittsburgh travels to SMU. I think they're going to lose to SMU, and I think they're going to lose to Clemson. I think Pittsburgh's probably going to be 10-2. Looking at their schedule, Pittsburgh hosts Syracuse. They play Southern Methodist on the road. They host Virginia. They host Clemson. They travel to Louisville, and they travel to Boston College. I think Pittsburgh's going to end the year 9-3 or 10-2. I think they're going to lose to SMU, Louisville, and Clemson and be 9-3 on the year. I think they will win this game and enter November undefeated, but they're going to lose some games in November. I don't think they'll ultimately get in the playoffs, so I'm selling Pittsburgh as a contender. And as long as Clemson keeps winning games in the ACC, Clemson's going to end up being the team that replaces Pittsburgh when we update this poll. I'm not going to update it right now, but I'm just telling you we'll keep Pittsburgh at number 8 for now. So Penn State will remain at 5, BYU will remain at 6, Indiana 7, Pittsburgh 8, Army. Who does Army play? Army does not play until November 2nd, so they will remain at 9. Navy's going to lose to Notre Dame. They're going to drop out of this top 12. Liberty Will Liberty move up to 10? And when you type in Liberty schedule on Google, the New York Liberty WNBA champions show up. Not, ooh, okay. I do have a game update, a rare game update for you guys. Where is this game? What channel is this on? Kennesaw State, who is 0-6, is beating 5-0 Liberty. If that holds up, if Kennesaw State beats Liberty, this is Kennesaw State's first year in the FBS. But if Kennesaw State's upset over Liberty holds up, then this pretty much kills Liberty's chances of making the playoff. It kills their chances of making the top 25 because Liberty losing to Kennesaw State is the equivalent of Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. Because you're 5-0, this team's 0-6. They are going to have to make some adjustments. So I'm looking to see what channel this game is on. I'm guessing, okay, it's on CBS Sports Network. All right, perfect. This is a rare occasion where I'm actually watching college football during Under the Bleachers. But Kadon Salter, Quinton Cooley, Liberty has some NFL prospects on their team at quarterback and running back, but they are losing to 0-6 Kennesaw State right now. That is on CBS Sports Network. And, I might just, if Brandice doesn't show up, I think what we're going to do is we're going to live stream a little bit of that until 9 p.m., and then I will do the show with Oren. Okay. And number 12, so I know the AP poll has something different than what I do. So assuming Navy and Liberty lose this weekend, let's say the top, I think LSU replaces Texas A&M in my poll next week. And even if Liberty comes back and wins, the fact that they're trailing Kennesaw State on the road, that is a black eye. That's a black eye for their playoff chances. Like, that is literally a death sentence for their playoff chances. But, Georgia would move back into my top 12 next week, as would Texas. So Ohio State would probably move up from 12 to 10 behind Army. And Georgia and Texas, who are both in the top 5 of the AP poll, would move back into the top 12 for me. And I would have those two teams at 11 and 12, respectively. I know that's harsh, but I'm going to give the undefeated teams priority over Georgia and Texas. Even though I think Georgia and Texas are playoff teams, until they lose, we'll see. But that is the top 12 for now. And, it's 8:20. I know my phone's charging. It is at 100%. I'm going to look at the games I told Will. Yeah, because there's 9 games on the YouTube channel. There's 9 games. I'm going to pick my winners for those 9 games. You know what? I will do that in a second. I will do that at halftime. There's 59 seconds left. We get a chance to scout Kadon Salter and Quinton Cooley, NFL draft prospects for the 2025 NFL draft. I'm going to scout those prospects and give Brandice a little bit more time before we have to pick our winners. And Kadon Salter, a very inaccurate pass. I had a third-round grade on Kadon Salter at the beginning of the year, but I really haven't had a chance to watch him in person because Liberty's not on when I'm doing a show. And the only reason I'm watching Liberty is because when William is here, the show is more structured. When I have to carry the weight for William because he's not feeling well, I'm more likely to go on rants, get a little bit off topic, do my thing. So, Liberty is going to get the ball to start the second half. But so far, I am not impressed with Kadon Salter or Cooley. And the fact that Liberty is losing to 0-6 Kennesaw State, you know, that is not a good look for them. But I'm going to go into YouTube and find out what the set, not because we have 9 games. Williams scheduled 7 games to pick. I've got 9. I've got 9 games here. And yeah, I am reading the hypnosis. So, okay. All right, let's start. I've got the list of games up here. Syracuse versus Pittsburgh. I think Liberty just scored here. Yeah. I take my eyes off the game for 2 seconds because they call a timeout because I want to check what's on the lineup here for the games. And Caden Salter throws a touchdown. We're going to have a tie game between Liberty and winless Kennesaw State. And this is a good throw by Salter there. Really bad coverage by Kennesaw State. You can see why they're 0-6. And a really good throw. To be fair to Salter, he only went through 1 read, 1 progression, but his man was open and he got him the ball. He did his job, and now Liberty and Kennesaw State are tied at 14 apiece with 48 seconds left in the half. That was a 12-play, 81-yard drive. Only took up 2 minutes and 12 seconds. So Liberty, Kennesaw State tied now. All right. All right, so I'm gonna let's go with the winners here. Yeah. As far as the winners go, I'm gonna start with Syracuse Pittsburgh. And for Syracuse Pittsburgh, I like Pittsburgh. I know Syracuse has a good quarterback in Kyle McCord. They have a really good tight end in Rondre Gadsden II. Pittsburgh also has a good tight end in Gavin Bartholomew. This is going to be a tight end matchup. So I think both tight ends are going to show up and do their thing, but I like the Pitt Panthers 27-20 over Syracuse tomorrow. The next game is a Friday night game, Boise State versus UNLV. Boise State travels to UNLV in Las Vegas, Nevada at Allegiant Stadium. That is on Friday night. I mean, there's a lot going on Friday. Not only do you have Game 1 of the World Series with Yankees-Dodgers, you also have UNLV-BYU, you have the MLS playoffs, you have college soccer. I'm coming out with my first MLS mock draft on Friday. It's the 12-year anniversary of Draft Utopia on Friday. I mean, I founded Draft Utopia on Tuesday, October 25th, 2012. That was the day we launched the website. I had the podcast back in November of 2011 when I worked at Rant Sports, but I got May 25th, 2012. Somewhere around that time, I had like a little bit of a midlife crisis where I was dealing stuff. I Rant Sports moved on from me, and then I launched Draft Utopia in October of that year as well. I do have some people in the chat room. Subpar Lawyer is in the chat room. He's talking about the SEC falling off, and he also wants us to talk about Oregon, Illinois. That is the Saturday game at 3:30 on CBS. So we will get to that, Subpar Lawyer. I promise you. That is one of the games William put on the list. He was able to at least contribute in that respect while working on the thumbnail. I appreciate that, William. So I like Boise State over UNLV. Ashton Jeanty has just been Ashton Jeanty has just been something else. You know, But Nebraska, Ohio State. If Dylan Raiola thought Indiana's defense was going to be a piece of work, just wait until Ohio State. Just wait until Columbus. I like Ohio State 63-0. I hope Raiola at least makes this entertaining. And Ohio State had a bye week after losing to Oregon, so they really have to focus on this game. They cannot look ahead to Penn State. And if they do look ahead to Penn State, Nebraska's got a chance to score some points and keep this close. But I'm gonna take the Buckeyes over Nebraska. Washington versus Indiana. This is the game College Game Day is going to. I added this to the slate of games. I like Indiana. I don't know why College Game Day is going to Indiana, but I like Indiana over Washington. Kennesaw State driving. They get a first down, and they're past midfield. Sorry about the getting off topic. It's just Kennesaw State and Liberty are playing each other here, and I am providing game-by-game updates. Okay, next up is Notre Dame versus Navy. I am going to pick Notre Dame to beat Navy. They just have a better football team on paper. Navy's had a great story, 6-0 to start the year, but I think the Fighting Irish handle business against Navy. Illinois versus Oregon. This is the game Subpar Lawyer has requested we talk about. Oregon, Illinois. I need you to talk about Oregon, Illinois. Well, I like Zachary Franklin, the wide receiver on Illinois, Zachary Franklin. I've been scouting him dating back to his days at UTSA. So, we will talk about that, Subpar Lawyer. We'll talk about Zachary Franklin versus Jabbar Muhammad. I think that's a big matchup for Illinois, and they're going to have to win that matchup. Mike Jarvis, Liberty defenseman, just got injured. And it's 2nd and 18 for Kennesaw State with 10 seconds left in the half. I think Oregon's going to handle business, Subpar Lawyer. So if you're an Illini fan, I send my condolences to you. If you're an Oregon fan like my friend Daniel in California, then I think you're going to be in good company here. Liberty with a big tackle on 2nd and 18. Kennesaw State could use a timeout, but they're going to take this thing into halftime, and Liberty's going to get the ball to start the second half. So I think Liberty's going to make the proper second half adjustments. They need to. I mean, this is unacceptable. You're 5-0, and Kennesaw State is 0-6. They are the rookie in the FBS this year, and you're tied with them. That is not acceptable. I would be fuming if I were Liberty's head coach. But, all right, so looking at this, I like Oregon. Dylan Gabriel, I know he's not spectacular, but Illinois was on CBS last week. Oregon had a full week to prepare for Illinois and watch that game on CBS, watch the game tape. They know what they're going to do. They know what looks they're going to bring. I think the Ducks handle business 31-17 over the Illini. Alabama, Missouri. Alabama, I don't see Alabama losing 2 in a row. At the same token, Missouri does have Luther Burden. Alabama has multiple corners that should be able to contain Burden. I think Brady Cook is dealing with an injury, and I just don't see Alabama losing 2 in a row. Give me Missouri. I do think LSU beats Alabama in a few weeks, though. But I like Missouri over Alabama. Texas, Vanderbilt. Texas is not losing 2 in a row. Vanderbilt, they've pulled off a few impressive upsets, but I like the Horns to win this one over Vanderbilt. And then the game of the week, LSU versus Texas A&M, a game that's going to decide who the only undefeated team in SEC conference play is. Give me LSU. Will Campbell, the number 1 left tackle in this draft. I mean, LSU has 2 of the top 3 LSU's got 2 of the top 4 offensive tackles. I did move Connor Lee out of Oregon ahead of Emory Jones after what I saw against Ohio State. But give me LSU. Give me Garrett Nussmeier. He's made more NFL throws. That is Brandice Bell, I believe. So awesome. Great for you to join us. I just wrapped up predicting the games, but I will give you the floor to talk about whatever you would like for the next 28 minutes.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I got 28 minutes worth of talks in me. Well, I guess we could do a
We
recap.
can end at 8:50 if you want,
already...
but I'm going to give you the floor, Brandice.
Okay. Well, Alabama, you called it. You called it. You were the only one of us that said that Tennessee was going to win. And honestly, I wanted you to be right. I think I said that last week, that I was hoping that Alabama lost. I'm so proud of Tennessee for doing what Georgia couldn't. And I think that there's a strong possibility that Alabama might not make the playoffs. What are you thinking on that?
Yeah, because the segment William prepared is what team do you think that's currently in the top 12 is going to miss the playoff? I made the case for Alabama earlier because they got to play Missouri and LSU on the road. I think they're going to lose one of those games. I think they beat Missouri, but LSU's got 2 of the top 4 offensive tackles in this year's NFL draft. I don't think Alabama has the edge rushers to stop LSU on the road in a hostile Death Valley environment with Will Campbell and Emory Jones at offensive tackle. And LSU's pretty strong at guard as well. And Nussmeier's made more NFL throws in recent weeks. I don't think he's as good of a prospect as Jane Daniels was a year ago, but I think he can outduel Milroe. Milroe's had some shaky games in recent weeks since his peak against the Georgia Bulldogs. And after the Georgia game, Milroe went from being a 3rd-round QB on my rankings to the number 2 QB behind Cam Ward. But the last 2 weeks, he's kind of reverted to that 3rd-round QB where I originally had him graded. So, Milroe's got to get out of this funk he's in, because these next 2 games, if Alabama can win these 2 road games against Missouri and LSU, I think they'll be okay, and I think they'll still find a way to make the playoff as a 10 through 12 seed. But if they don't, they're out of it. They're done.
Yeah. I'm wondering now, because there's so many teams that are not in the Power 4 that are undefeated, that you wonder, could there be a possibility that those teams make it and they don't? I mean, I don't know how they're going to do that, because obviously the strength of schedule is probably going to favor Alabama. But if you're not a Power 4 team and you've got 1 loss and you see Alabama in the top 12, like, you'd probably be a little confused, upset, if they only have 2 losses. Definitely if they have more than 2. But
yeah, because I think the number 1 seed's probably going to go to the Big Ten champion if they're undefeated in the playoff. And that's probably going to be Oregon right now if things hold up. But Oregon's going to have, I think Ohio State could beat Oregon in a rematch on a neutral site. But you can't lock Ohio State in that Big Ten championship because, Penn State and Indiana could both play spoiler. I said last week that I wasn't confident there was a dark horse team that could crack the playoff, but Indiana, if they beat Ohio State, and let's say Penn State loses to Ohio State and Indiana beats Ohio State in Columbus, it's Oregon versus Indiana in the Big Ten title, and Oregon's going to be undefeated, and they would probably get the number 1 overall seed in that scenario. I think as long as Oregon wins out, they're the top seed in the playoff. And right now, it is the Ducks seed to lose. The top seed in the playoff, I think, is Oregon's to lose right now. SEC champion will be the number 2 overall seed. Even though there's not an undefeated SEC team, I've got Miami at 2 in my rankings, but that's only because they're undefeated. The reality is Miami's probably going to be the 3 seed. I still think Georgia's the best team in the SEC. I think you agree with me on that, but there are only 2 undefeateds in conference play in the SEC, LSU and Texas A&M. I picked LSU to win, but I put Texas A&M at 4 in my rankings because they're the only SEC team undefeated in conference play with a 6-0 or 5-0 record in conference play. They've got the best record, and that LSU Texas A&M game, whoever wins that game controls their own destiny, Brandice, because as long as they win out, they're going to get Georgia in the SEC title. They'll probably lose. They'll probably get smacked by Uga, but as long as they win out, they control their own destiny.
Well, looking at Oregon, Penn State, Miami, looking at their schedules, Oregon's, to me, got the toughest ride out. I think Oregon may be the one team that does end up with at least one loss. I actually think that Penn State could come out of this undefeated. It's a possibility. I just, that Penn State Ohio game is going to be very interesting because you don't really know which way the wind's going to blow on that. I don't even want to make a prediction at this point. I've got to see Penn State play Wisconsin this weekend to really kind of flesh it out. Miami, to me, has the easiest ride on out. They could, though, get, hemmed up by Georgia Tech or Syracuse coming down the pike, or even Florida State just, eager to prove that they're the best team in Florida. I actually think, though, the Miami Hurricanes could end up going undefeated this season, which could put them in the number 1 spot. Oregon, it's kind of a toss-up for me. I think Oregon's going to lose at least one game. And then, obviously, we've got the SEC teams all with at least one loss. The ones that we at least thought would be in the top 3, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. But
the Big 12 winner is going to be the 4 seed in the playoff. Right now, I'm under the impression that we are going to get whoever wins the Iowa State-Kansas State game final week of the year is probably going to be the team, and they might meet in a rematch. If Kansas State beats Iowa State at home, as the experts project, they might have a rematch on a neutral site the following week. And if Iowa State wins that game, they would be the 4 seed. But for me right now, Iowa State and Kansas State, that's probably the game. Kansas State has to slip up against somebody else besides BYU, and BYU's got a tough schedule. BYU plays a Central Florida team that's very dangerous with KJ Jefferson at quarterback, RJ Harvey. I picked BYU to win, but Central Florida could very easily pull off the upset. Ole Gordon gave this BYU run defense problems. Then BYU goes to Utah on the road. If they can come out of those 2 road games without a loss, BYU would end the year with Kansas at home, Arizona State on the road, and Houston at home. I think if BYU can win their next 2 games, they're probably going to end the year undefeated. It just depends. I think they're going to lose to Utah, but I could see Central Florida upsetting BYU too. Central Florida is the best 3-4 team in the country. They did start the year 3-0. And Iowa State, they do not play anybody until November 2nd when they host Texas Tech. I think they're going to win that game. They get Kansas on the road at Arrowhead on November 9th, but Kansas has lost too many early games to be a serious contender. And then they get Cincinnati at home. They'll probably win that. So I think the last 2 games of the year, Iowa State travels to Utah on November 23rd, and they host Kansas State on November 30th at home. If they can get through those last 2 games without a loss, they will be undefeated heading into the big. But yeah, that's the thing. BYU and Iowa State both look like they are going to be 10-2 teams at the worst. Kansas State, Colorado could play spoiler if they keep winning, Brandice, but, it's hard to say if they're going to end up winning. I feel like Arizona's lost too many big games with they got blown out by BYU and Kansas State. I don't think Arizona is going to make the Big 12 title. Kansas State's interesting because they get Kansas at home this week. They get Houston on the road, Arizona State at home, Cincinnati at home. If they beat Iowa State, it looks like BYU's probably going to be in the Big 12 championship unless they lose both games. But Kansas State's got a very easy schedule. It's looking like whoever wins that Kansas State-Iowa State game is going to be in the Big 12 championship against BYU. And if BYU loses multiple games, we're looking at a Kansas State-Iowa State rematch on a neutral site. if Iowa State can't close them out in the regular season.
So in your eyes, BYU wins the Big 12?
I like Kansas State, to be completely honest. I think Kansas State's going to win the Big 12, but Colorado and Iowa State and BYU are making things interesting right now, Brandice, in what has been the most unpredictable conference in college football.
Yeah, my only thing is I feel like BYU had a fairly easy schedule this year. I mean, not completely easy, but definitely not difficult. So I'm wondering if that will factor in. I guess if you're undefeated, though, regardless of your strength of schedule, something's gotta put you in the playoffs. I think they have a chance to win out for sure. I don't know. It's complicated because if BYU goes undefeated and Kansas State loses one game, could the argument be made that because their schedule is harder, they deserve to make it?
Yeah, it's basically between BYU, Iowa State, and Kansas for the Big 12 title. Those are the three teams vying for the two spots.
Mhm.
Texas Tech's 3-1 in conference play. So is Cincinnati. I don't think those teams are going to make the title. Colorado, if they win out, they could play spoiler and make the game, but they need some help, Brandice. I mean, they need some help. They need BYU to lose 2 games to Central Florida and Utah, or they need Iowa State to beat Kansas State. If Iowa
Yeah.
State ends the year undefeated, because that's the thing. If BYU and they need BYU to lose both games in the Big 12 on the road. BYU's only got 2 road games left on the year against Central Florida and Utah. Colorado needs BYU to lose those 2 games, and they need Iowa State to beat Kansas, because Kansas State has that head-to-head win over Colorado, and that's really what cripples Colorado's chances of making the Big 12 title, even if they win out.
Well, not only that, but the argument could definitely be made that Texas Tech gives them the business. We don't know for sure that they're going to win that game.
I mean, I believe Colorado does play Texas Tech on the road.
Mm-hmm.
See, yeah, they do. So Texas Tech hosts that game, and Cincinnati's 3-1. So if Cincinnati goes into Colorado and beats the Buffaloes, that Cincinnati-Colorado game this weekend sort of an elimination game with both teams 3-1 in the Big 12. That's kind of an elimination game for both teams. So Colorado's got to win 2 elimination games just to be in this discussion. Then they got to beat Utah at home, Kansas on the road in Arrowhead, and then they got to beat Oklahoma State at home to end the year. Colorado does feel like a long shot because they could easily lose 2 of their next 5 with their schedule.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, even if they do win out, I think in their division, there's going to be at least 3 teams with 1 or fewer losses. So it's just going to be a little tough for them to get in. I guess Penn State.
If BYU is 1 loss in conference play, but they're 11-1 and Colorado's 10-2 overall, wouldn't BYU get in? That's kind of what I'm conflicted on.
In my eyes, BYU wins out. I don't really see them struggling with UCF, Utah. It's complicated because, again, towards the end of the season, you start to see these teams that are undefeated kind of resting on their laurels. And then you've got these teams that have absolutely nothing to lose, and they just play balls to the walls and beat them. And it could be Utah.
Right now, it looks like it's going to be BYU versus the winner of Kansas State, Iowa State. That looks like the Big 12 championship at this point. And basically, the only way Colorado could get in is they win out and they get some help from Iowa State, and BYU loses multiple games on the road. I think that's the only path for Colorado, and it's a long shot. I would say it's at least a 50-1 long shot if I were setting a betting line for that. Not that it can't happen, but Yeah. And then you look at some of the other teams. Penn State's currently number 5. They're going to be in the playoff. I don't know where they'll be seated. They could be seated as high as 5. They could be number 1 if Oregon loses, because Oregon's got to play Michigan on the road. I think BYU is going to be in the playoff. I do. Even if as long as they keep winning, they're going to be in the playoff. Indiana's only tough game is against Ohio State. College game day is going to be in Indiana, Bloomington this weekend when they host Washington. They're going to win that game. As long as Indiana's probably going to be in the playoff as like a 10, 11, or 12 seed, Brandice. That's the reality. Unless they slip up against Washington, they're probably going to be in as a 10 or 11 seed. That would be my guess. Because they got to play Michigan State on the road. They get Michigan at home. As long as Indiana doesn't lose to Washington or Michigan, they're going to be in the playoff. I think even with a loss to Ohio State, they're in as a 10 or 11 or 12 seed. Because there's just too much that favors them right now. That doesn't mean they'll get in, but they'll be on the bubble.
But I mean,
or they'll be first 2 out, worst case scenario.
What's the possibility? What's the possibility of them actually being the number 1 seed and being the Big Ten champs?
It's possible, but that would just screw up everything, and everybody would pick the 8-9 winner to beat them in the next round. That'd be kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
If
we get to, it looks like Thanksgiving, and Ohio State is playing Indiana, and Indiana wins. Indiana basically is won.
Indiana and Oregon are basically the 2 teams playing for the Big Ten title, or Penn State if Penn State beats Ohio State as well, which would be nuts. So I think Indiana's in the playoff. Pittsburgh, I'm selling Pittsburgh. I love what Pittsburgh's done as a program. Their college soccer and college volleyball teams have kicked butt, but I'm selling Pitt football. Here's why, Brandice. They host Syracuse this week. Even if they win that game, they are going to lose to Southern Methodist on the road. They get Louisville on the road, and they get Clemson at home. They are going to lose 2 of those 3 at the bare minimum. I have them at 9-3 end the year. I think we're going to get Miami versus 1 loss. Clemson in the ACC title, but if Pittsburgh can keep winning games, they can play spoiler and keep Clemson from getting the ACC title. And I think that's Miami's best path to a perfect season. And if that happens, Pittsburgh might get in as a 10 or 11 seed. I don't think they are going to be anything more than that, though. Army. I'm selling Pittsburgh, though. Their schedule's too tough. I think they will collapse down the stretch. It'll open things up for another SEC or Big Ten team. Army, they're going to lose eventually. I think they got to play Navy or Notre Dame to end the year. I'm going to look up their schedule right now. The Army Black Knights. They get Air Force, North Texas. They get Notre Dame on November 23rd. And they get Navy on December 14th after the AAC championship. Army's gonna have 1 loss. Their Army's gonna lose to Notre Dame. So is Navy. Liberty is playing Kennesaw State right now. I was actually live streaming that game before you joined because I tackled through most of the topics William had so quickly. And Liberty is 5-0. Kennesaw State is 0-6. And Kennesaw State's was beating Liberty in the first half. So if that happens, that is essentially a kiss of death for Liberty. Not just as a group of 5 team, Brandice, but that's a kiss of death to them entering the top 25. Because Liberty only got 1 top 25 vote in the AP poll this week, despite being 5-0. They're the only unbeaten outside of the top 25 at this point in the season, Brandice. So if Kennesaw State finds a way to upset Liberty, that is a kiss of death to Liberty's playoff chances and their top 25 chances.
So let's say Notre Dame wins out. Who gets kicked out?
I think if Notre Dame and Boise win out, those teams are in. Both of them. Boise's probably 12. Notre Dame's probably 10 or 9.
So Notre Dame and Boise both make it. Does that mean that either, let's see, I guess Penn State?
Notre Dame's a group of 5
I guess it would be Alabama.
Notre Dame's an independent team. They're not in a conference, but they're also not considered a group of 5 team because their brand is so massive. And the only challengers to Notre Dame as far as group of 5 status go are probably Boise State and UNLV. Those are the only two group of 5s in the top 25, I believe, along with Army and Navy, Brandice. Those are like the 5 group of 5 teams in the top 25. And then you got Liberty. That's it. There's like 6 group of 5 teams jockeying for one playoff spot. I think Notre Dame is going to win out, which is eventually going to knock Army and Navy out. Boise State and UNLV are going to split, I think. Well, I'm picking Boise State to beat UNLV because Genty's been so damn good for the Broncos, but UNLV hosts that game. They could steal this game, and then Boise gets their revenge in the Mountain West Championship. That's also a possibility. You know, I think those two teams are going to meet in the Mountain West. BYU and Boise and UNLV are going to meet in the Mountain West Championship. They're going to play each other twice, and I think they're going to cancel. I think their wins are going to cancel each other out, which will lead to Notre Dame getting the group of 5 spot. If I had to take an educated guess right now, Brandice.
Yeah. I mean, there is still the possibility that you do have 2 non-Power 4 teams making it, but I don't think it's going to be. It's probably going to be Boise State or Notre Dame, and Notre Dame makes more sense considering their schedule.
Because I'm looking at this thing right now. An undefeated Big Ten team would be the 1 seed. Georgia would be the 2 seed at 1 loss. Miami would be the 3 seed as ACC champions. Whoever wins the Big 12s at 4. Penn State, Ohio State, or Indiana could be number 5. It just depends on who keeps winning in the Big Ten. I think Texas would be 6. As long as they keep winning, Texas would be a top 6 seed. I don't know who gets those 7 and 8 seeds, but I would think Ohio State or Penn State would both get a home game in this 5-7 range. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm thinking both Penn State, Ohio State will get a home playoff game, and then it's up in the air, Brandice, depending on how the season ends. Those last 5 spots are wide open. Anything could happen.
What is the likelihood in your mind that Vanderbilt could do to Texas what they did to Alabama?
I'll give it a 30% chance. I like Texas to rebound. I don't see the Longhorns losing 2 in a row, but you can't write off Vanderbilt either. They upset Virginia Tech. They upset Alabama. They're in the top 25 for a reason. This is a good football team. So, you can't write them off. I think Clemson will probably – I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Clemson or Notre Dame ends up as the 8th seed because right now it could be Tennessee, it could be Clemson, it could be Notre Dame, but it feels like those 3 teams are jockeying for that last 8 seed. And it could be Indiana if they keep winning. Those are the 4 teams I'm looking at for the 8 seed. It could be the Big 12 runner-up as well, but it feels like those 4 teams are jockeying for spots 8 through 11 at the end of the year, and then we're going to get Boise, Notre Dame, or UNLV at 12. Boise or UNLV at 12 if Notre Dame's in the top 10 or 11. That's kind of what I'm looking at, but we'll see. We can't really jump to too many conclusions. I would love to see a Oregon-Boise State rematch in the 5-12 game. I don't think it'll happen, but I would love to see that as a fan.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot riding on these games kind of coming around Thanksgiving. It's going to be a very interesting Thanksgiving. I'm hoping that Georgia can win out, but, they do have to play Tennessee and prove that they're better than Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, all of these SEC teams. Tennessee has definitely surprised me in a way that I was not expecting, but they were decent last year. I think they've been slowly kind of boiling, and they're hitting a stride right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks.
Yeah, before we close out, I was live streaming both the first 2 games on ABC. I pulled an all-nighter on Friday, so I got tired after the first half of Tennessee, Alabama. But we were watching the Miami-Louisville game. That game was electric. The touchdowns back and forth. And then to see Alabama-Tennessee 7-0 at halftime, it's kind of a letdown. But Tennessee made these second half adjustments and rallied and found a way to win. So
Yeah, I mean, I was actually at a football tournament this weekend, so I wasn't able to watch all of the games, but I ended up watching the highlights. Um, and I was just Miami has just kind of come out of absolutely nowhere. I'm There were some teams that I knew were kind of hitting their stride last season, and Miami wasn't necessarily one of them, but sometimes people just turn things around.
Yep. So, anything else we need to cover before we sign off? I think it was kind of nice to have this laid back format where we just talked about the top 12. We recapped some of the games and basically went over our winners. I like I thought Georgia made a statement versus Texas. I mean, just looking at I think the quarterback market in the next two NFL drafts is kind of bearish right now. I think there's Cam Ward, there's Shadur Sanders, there's everybody else in this draft. Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe are still kind of jockeying for that QB3. And somebody's going to get hyped up as QB3 as a first round quarterback, but it right now it feels like it's Carson Beck, I guess, is still in it to be picked in round one, but it's between Beck, Milroe, Ward. Ward's going to be the first guy off the board, I think, and then maybe Sanders, and then after that, it's kind of up in the air. And then next year, it looks like Arch Manning, Nico Imaleva will be the round one guys, and then there's everybody else. So I think and I think there's more than two teams in the market for quarterbacks in the NFL right now, Brandice, but I also think the college game doesn't have as many quarterbacks as the scouts would like. So I think we're at a point where the demand for the quarterback position outweighs the supply for it. And it's really going to be interesting to see who can capitalize on that in the NFL in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that there's a lot of quarterbacks that came out last year, or at least three, that kind of came out maybe a little too early or were thrown in a little bit too early. Thinking just right off the bat, Bryce Young, some of these quarterbacks weren't ready. And I think what they did with Jordan Love in the NFL is kind of the best way to do it. Not every quarterback comes out ready to play. You think that the transition from college to the NFL is seamless, but it's clearly not. You've got a bunch of guys that you might have some 4-stars, some 5-star recruits on your team, but it's not a team full of 4 and 5 stars. When you get to the NFL, that's the kind of, ilk that you're playing with. And I think a lot of the quarterbacks come out thinking they're just going to perform just as well as they did at their school. Regardless of your draft pick, it doesn't always work that way. And I think it would be bad if some of these quarterbacks started next year in the NFL. So it will be good for some of them to kind of sit and wait underneath, a more seasoned quarterback. I think that happened with Justin Fields. I think he started playing a little bit too early. Probably should have kind of waited. I think what they're doing with Penix in the NFL is great. I think once he starts playing, just kind of being under Kirk Cousins' tutelage, he's going to be much better than some of the guys that were just kind of thrust into it and had to find their legs.
Yeah, I think McCarthy and Penix could be good. May got some time to develop. He's looked good. Caleb Daniels. I thought 2024 was like a historically good quarterback draft, whereas historically good and historically deep. I think we had 9 to 11 quarterbacks graded out as starters for this draft. 24 and 25, 26. I see like 2 at the top that I like. And then I think there's a drop off after those 2. And it feels like there's a drop off between Cam Ward and the next guy, but it's early. So we'll see what happens. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up? It's been an hour. It's been fun. 30 minutes with you, Brandice. And after we sign off, I got to get ready for Utopia Football Insider with Oren. But anything else you want to talk about before I sign off for this week's edition of Under the Bleachers?
No, I think that's about it.
Yeah, we wish William a safe recovery, and we will be back next week to preview Ohio State, Penn State. See you then.